based off of my life experiences, I had a different perception than what my parents had in their life experiences. And, the way my grandfather ran the business was different from how my dad ran the business. It's different than how I run the business. And there's no wrong way about it because we're still in business, right? We have been successful for so long. So I think it just kind of shows that there is some kind of, as times change and people change and your employees change and the generational mindset changes with your employees, and your company growing, it's obviously change needs to happen, and I think they recognize that.
Welcome to Peer Talk, a dialogue with business owners just like you. Peer Talk conversations run the gamut of business challenges facing owners today. The host of Peer Talk is Dan Crowley, founder and owner of Peer Executive Groups, which provides a safe space for owners to share their experience, grow their businesses, and learn from their peers.
Okay, welcome to Peer Talk. There are a number of great business owners out there, just like yourself, who would love to share their experiences with you, and we hope to give them a voice. Today on Peer Talk, we will focus on continuation planning, and that involves succession to the next generation. We'll look at the operational transition of Alberto Pianelli into F&B Rentals leadership. We'll also touch on financial and legal transition of a business near the end of our podcast. Alberto started in rental like many young children do in families that are focused in rental, and he took some time away from rental and didn't come back till he was about 26 or 27, at which point he has committed himself to getting involved with leading F&B Rentals. He also serves others through the ARA, American Rental Association, currently the president of ARA of California. He was very active and served on the first YPN board for Young Professionals Network and was involved in the Anaheim planning for the show and has been active with legislative issues in California as well as nationally. Welcome to another episode of Peer Talk. Today we have Alberto Pianelli from F&B Rentals. Welcome, Alberto.
Thank you so much, Stan, for having me.
Hey, no problem. We are very excited to have you. We've had a few people on from Southern California, but on the party side. So let's talk a little bit about equipment rental. And you are in a position where you've taken over from a succession standpoint from Rob and Jessica Shipley. And why don't you tell us a little bit about F&B and how you got started in rental?
Sure, absolutely. So, if we really want to go to what got us started, it was my grandfather. He came from, after he got out of the Army after the Korean War, he had an opportunity to work with a cousin in Southern California who owned a gas station. And so he began working at the gas station and later on opened his own gas station and then started running U-Hauls from the gas station. And then U-Haul said, wow, you're doing really well. So we're going to open up 3 more stores around you. And my grandfather didn't like that. So he said, you know what? I bet I can be more successful if I open up if I bought my own trailers and I rented out my own stuff. So the family business really started with my grandpa Shipley. In the 60s, he rented everything from trailers to motorhomes to whatever you can think of. And that's how we kind of got started. And then he opened up 3 stores. He opened up 2 Shipley's Rentals and then an F&B Rentals. F&B Rentals was founded on July 5th of 1975. And F&B actually stands for Fran and Bob, which is my grandparents, their initials. And so my dad started renting out little things. It was literally just him and one other guy running the show for a long time. And he slowly, over the years, built it up into what it is today. And I've had the opportunity to help it grow. So I came into the business when I was a teenager. Really, it was my mom trying to keep me out of trouble during the summertime. I was kind of a little bit of a wild child, and so they thought it was best that I come to work with my dad and, start washing machines. And we had dogs then. We had dogs guarding our place, so I'd clean up the dog poop and, I would just, but I mean, the opportunity as, a teenager, even like a preteen when I was doing little odds and ends around here, was that I got to learn how to drive. I learned how the equipment. I learned how to wrench on stuff. I learned a lot of the basics of, I think is basics today of the rental industry, just understanding and looking for different things. And it was such at the time, of course, I thought it was annoying and boring, but looking back at it, I'm really grateful for those experiences of learning how to tie down things, learning how to, change oil and learn how to change a tire, what to look for. And it's something that is super valuable to me. I mean, I learned how to drive stick shift and, all these different things. And when I turned 18, I jumped in the truck and I started doing deliveries, and for an 18-year-old, jumping in a rollback truck with, 10,000 pounds on the back and doing deliveries was the dream. That was my dream. I loved it. I loved making deliveries. I loved the service aspect of our business. And I was really good on the phones and taking orders. And so it was awesome. I'm glad I grew up with it.
So it's interesting. Like, obviously it's a hands-on industry. It's definitely almost like a sandbox you're going to play in, right? Whether it be the equipment or the customers or the employees. So so Rob's running it. You're coming in later on. Your brother comes in. What were his strengths? And speak about Jessica as well as she touches the business. But when we look at the business development, we look at people and managing people, managing the assets, choosing the assets, managing the customer experience. And then obviously sales and marketing, growing the business. So, and of course, then you have the financials on the back end, which we can't forget about. But what would you say Rob's strength was when you were getting, formative and starting to get more involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what his strength is that, and continues to be, is he remembers everything. And he also, it's like, when it comes down to numbers and looking at return on investment and looking at those things, he can process it all in his brain. I'm the kind of person, I need to put it in a spreadsheet. I need to see the visuals for it to make sense. But with Rob, it's like, you talk about numbers with him and he's doing the math in his head and he'll tell you, whatever, piece of equipment's, some random number like 49,600, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, that equipment only made, 71%. And he can tell you exactly what that number was. And, so that was always his strength. And I think also he was, growing the business where it was so small, he had the opportunity. Because he really serviced it was the local people. It was like, the weekend warriors doing home repairs. And so a lot of the equipment we had was really small, like little demo hammers, saws, different things. So he knew everything that he needed to know about that equipment. And so he knew in his mind, okay, this equipment, it's going to be useless in 3 years and we just got to replace it. Or this piece of equipment is good for 7 years, and that's when we know we need to replace it. So he had a really good grasp on his whole business, and he really did a good job at figuring out what works, what niches works for us as a business. So I give him a lot of credit for that.
So obviously, a lot of generational businesses like yours, they're focused initially on the operational transition, and so they've got to go through this kind of gymnastics of seeing does our progeny, does our next generation have the ability to do what we do? Because as you described, he had a knack for just being good with numbers and assessing utilization pretty well. So how did they introduce you? Like, did they have a plan? Was there a training plan, or did they basically say, let's keep him out in the yard as best, as much as we can, and then eventually we'll, introduce him to the computer?
Well, when I was 19, I mean, I had always been involved, but we had point of rental since 2000, right? And so we were one of the very first customers for point of rental. And so in 2005, I stepped away from the business at the end of 2005, and I went to school. I was 19 at the time when I kind of went away from the business, and I moved up to LA, and was just learning life as a young man, and went to work up there in a totally different field. I worked with in a dual diagnosis drug and alcohol and mental health facility for adolescents up in LA. And then I went to school for that. I went to school to become a drug and alcohol counselor. And so I did that. So, I mean, my whole focus in life really turned away from it. I was pretty successful up in LA. And I did that. And I remember my parents calling me probably, 7 years later and asking me, hey, what interest do you have on, taking over the business, or do you want to come back? Do you want to do this? They were really starting to plan their life and saying, what do we want to do? Do we want to, my brother's 10 years younger than I am. So he was still in high school. He was still in school. So they didn't, they weren't really seeing him as like, well, what's the options here? So I saw it as an opportunity to keep our family legacy going. I felt comfortable with the rental industry. I felt like the experience that I had working in mental health and all that and going to school really helped me understand people a lot more. And that kind of helped transition me to kind of come back. And I'm a firm believer that you can have multiple careers and do whatever you want to do if you put your mind to it, So I jumped back in, and at first they started me out as a salesperson, and I told them, hey, if I'm going to come back, I want to take over, and so I started as a salesperson, then assistant manager, and then manager, and a lot of the times, I think the hardest part working for family is that your family's your boss, right? And it's like you're working for your family, and a lot of the decisions that are made are based for what's best for the business, and not necessarily sometimes what's best for your ego and pride. And so there's a lot of times, and I think a lot of other people, when I talk to other guys and gals that their parents run the business, I hear the same thing where it's like we bumped heads. And when you work for family, there's my ideas and your ideas, and so I'm not gonna lie, and I don't think my dad would lie about it either. I think we bumped heads a little bit because I had a certain way of like, hey, this is what I think we should do, and I'm very grateful that my parents allowed me some slack to make decisions and enough slack to like make some mistakes in the rental industry, like with decision makings to like, what do we do with this customer? How do we handle this? That they can provide learning lessons for me, but it's not, it was like I had to kind of get re-educated in some of those aspects, and it was a humbling experience, but I needed that to become a stronger general manager for our business. You have to go through some of those learning aspects to be like, okay, you can't just, not all the customers have the best intentions for your equipment. just stuff like that. And it was good. It was a good learning lesson. And I'm very grateful.
How old were you when you came back?
I want to say I was 27.
Oh, wow. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, very different. And, we've seen that with, some really powerful operations where the younger generation goes away and does outside work, comes back later and has a lot of different experiences. I mean, you just basically identified like how you can all of a sudden mature into people management, people strategy, interacting with the employees and understanding, where they're coming from, as well as being part of management, right? So now you came back. At that point, it was pretty clear the intention was, okay, Alberto's coming back. He's gonna at some point want to, take the lead on this. Did you guys discuss what that would look like timing wise, or
No, it was
the training wheels off at some point, or
I think my parents discussed it. It never really got discussed with me. But to be honest, it's kind of I think I had an idea of how fast I wanted to go, and they had an idea of how fast I needed to go. And to be honest, we never really talked about it. And it's one of those things where, like I said, based off of my life experiences, I had a different perception than what my parents had in their life experiences. And, the way my grandfather ran the business was different from how my dad ran the business. It's different than how I run the business. And there's no wrong way about it because we're still in business, right? We have been successful for so long. So I think it just kind of shows that there is some kind of, as times change and people change and your employees change and the generational mindset changes with your employees, and your company growing, it's obviously change needs to happen. And I think they recognize that. And now we do communicate more about our plans for things. I do have a lot of say in what we do in our business, but I respect my family enough where we actually have a board meeting every week. We have a board of directors meeting, and we sit down and we talk about what we're going to do each week and what our plans are, and kind of discuss the things that we're knocking off our list and the things that we're working on, or the goals that we have that we need to take care of. And, so right now it's almost, I see it as I run the day-to-day operations. A lot of the back-end stuff, a lot of the financing, the money is handled by my father, and he'll say, okay, this is how much we can spend this year. And he doesn't necessarily get so much involved on what we need to purchase. That's me, right? Now, what the human resources aspect and making sure people's are taken care of on the human resources side, that's my mom, and she handles a lot of that. She handles the payroll, So to be honest, I'm grateful to have that team. We've created a solid team that, because I think that I'd be even more stressed if I had to handle the payroll and the human resources side, or, my dad's going out there securing the loans that we need for the next time we buy stuff. So all those things are very helpful to me. It's all stuff that, I've cross-trained with them about. If I had to step in and do payroll, I could. If I needed to talk to the banks, I could. But I think my dad still really likes controlling the money aspects of things. And to his credit, I would see why. This is his retirement. This is his future too. So
it's actually really a compelling design if you're able. Not everybody can do this, but you think about it. He kind of evolves into a CFO role, which and I know that if you get someone doing bookkeeping, the CFO can just be there for the critical needs. It's an outstanding move. I think if you're going to exit at some point, that would be your your exit path, right? You go from operator to that. And then on your mom's side, having her on the HR side, those are two great supporting roles that you would depend on anyway, right? So you would have to,
Right.
if they leave eventually, you're going to have to replace them. It may not be your strength. So you've evolved over time. If you look at the business and you look at the asset management, obviously the classifications of assets and the customers, and then your workforce, what are your strengths right now? How have you evolved? And what would you say is where you're really humming?
I would say my biggest strengths are in my management skills when it comes down to employees. I feel confident in my ability to lead a team and to communicate my needs from my team, and also just realizing the reality of who is on my team, and really trying to elevate people. And I've learned a long time ago that if I micromanage, then people are going to constantly wait around for me to come in and tell them how to do their job. And what I've learned that really works well for me is that I train people up to a point, and I allow them to make some mistakes. That's not the goal, is to allow them to make mistakes, but I want my salespeople, I want my mechanics, I want everyone who works for me to be assertive. I don't want them to have to wait around to get an order to do something. So if it's the guy that's cleaning machines, I want him to be assertive and be like, I'm done with what I have to do, but now I'm going to move on to something else because I know this just needs to get taken care of. Or if he notices, hey, there's oil leaking here that shouldn't be leaking, or hydraulic fluid that's leaking that should be, I'm going to go tell the mechanic, right? I don't want anyone on my team to say that's not my job. And I want someone to be assertive and say, well, I'm noticing this, so how can I be, what can I do to help, to be a yes person. And same thing for my salespeople and my management team to allow them to make decisions and say, with customers, if a customer is upset, to not just sit there and argue with them for over $100, because it's wasting, that counter person's time away from the phones. It's wasting the customer's time. They're going to be upset, and before, we used to have this stance where it was like, fight everything. And then I remember, because I felt it was right. And my dad would come in and he'd be like, nah, it's not worth it. And it took me a while to understand that it wasn't worth it. If you're bringing in a lot of money every day, it's like, I've started to learn from him, like, there's a cost of doing business. And it's funny because there's some times where he'll get frustrated over something the customer does or maybe a vendor does, and I'll have to remind him it's a cost of doing business, And so we joke around about that, but it's very true. It's like, there has to be some wiggle room. And I've always told my employees, if I know that if I mentally set aside money every year just for all the mess ups that are going to happen, I'd rather give it to them through, bonuses or, a better lunch or doing something for it. I'd rather give it back to my employees in gratitude. If I'm going to spend, X amount of money each year on the dumb stuff that happens around my work or we mess up, I'd rather give it to my employees. And them hearing that, I think, helps motivate them to want to be better employees, So, like I said, I think my strength comes into herding cats.
Yeah, there you go. And so and obviously, you're still a young man, continuing your education in the rental industry, as
Sure.
well as, do you get a chance to speak with others who've done business continuation and heard their stories? And what are you doing there?
Yeah, I'm constantly picking other guys' brains. Luckily I'm in a really good bag group. Probably the best bag group out of all the bag groups, I would say. I've never experienced any other bag groups, but I'm just going to go ahead and say mine's the best, which is the bro bag. It's filled with other rental operators that are just taking over their family businesses, and hearing their stories and the transition and the similar struggles. Uh, Really, there's nothing like having people kind of like, I don't want to say validate, but it's just like, hey, they have empathy of the same experiences, and we get to kind of feed off of each other and be like, okay, how do you handle this situation, and what's your experience with it? And what I really love about my bag group is that no one's telling each other what they got to do, right? Because everyone's thing is different, but we get to hear other people's experiences, and we kind of get to take and learn from other people what they went through, and it is so beneficial to reach out to my friends, because they are my friends now, and say, hey, what do you do about this? Like, have you ever ran across this? And it's so awesome, and I appreciate
It's fascinating. You were one of the founders of that peer group, and I know that I was in and out, kind of paying attention to what was going on, but definitely took a little bit of time to get its legs under it, and now it's our largest peer group member wise, and gosh, there has to be at least, I'm guessing, maybe 8 operators in there who have recently gone through business continuation or succession, or
Right.
are in the process of it, right? So it's like, so many different examples. And when we look at succession planning and continuation planning, you have to plan for the operation transition, but then you also need to get to a point where there's a financial and legal transition. And that's a hard part. That's it'd be great if you could commit it to paper, and that way everybody in the room, especially if you guys have board meetings. Have you guys done anything or discussed that at all yet, or do you see that 3 years out, or what's the timing on some of that?
It's been talked about, but it hasn't really come about just yet. I think it's something that I dream of, but I think it's something that is still on the table. I have a younger brother, and I think there's still a lot more discussion has to happen. I think the dream that my parents have is that my brother and I run this hand in hand, side by side, and and that's, in my eyes, I don't see that as a reality. And I know there's other rental operators out there that have siblings that they're the only one running the business, and their siblings aren't involved in it, and I know they're experiencing similar things that I'm going through.
Yeah, there's no question that's one of the challenges. Obviously, there's an organization called the Family Business Institute, and there's plenty of family businesses consultants out there that kind of work through those issues. And you having a peer group of people who've kind of worked through that, siblings at the table and trying to figure out those things. Number of members in the entire network of bag groups that do that. So that might be a good little summit we do on family business or something. I never even thought of that till now, but we'll have to think about that in the future. And so real quick, you had mentioned your brother. What kinds of things is he doing in the business at this point?
So currently he's not involved with the business. He's working for another company. And to be honest, at his age, I did the same thing. So working, there is something to be said, especially if you grow up with a family business, that working for other people and having a different boss, getting paid by someone else who has their own rules, who has their own policies, that have their own organizational charts and all these other things, like that is, working for other people is so important. It really puts a really good perspective on yourself, on where you fit in, and and being a part of something and being a worker bee. And I'm really grateful for working for other companies, to be honest.
Well, and obviously you guys are getting the benefit of that right now. Now, let's just pivot for a second and talk briefly about your involvement outside of F&B. So,
Sure.
Obviously, Rob Shipley has been very active with California Rental Association. Obviously, we have the rental rally happening this month. So absolutely everybody go out and check out the website where the rental rally is taking place for California Rental Association. And you have been very active with the American Rental Association.
Yes.
What's your current status look like with that?
So I am currently the ARA of California president. I was very lucky to get chosen and appointed by my peers. And I'm very, for them to think of me as to kind of lead the charge a little bit. I don't take that lightly. When my peers elected me to become the president of California, it's an honor. There's a lot of people in California. There's a lot of talented people in California. There's a lot of people being of service in the ARA in California, and I see it as definitely it's an awesome experience. Being involved with the ARA. I really challenge everyone to be involved with their association if they're in one, because I get so much out of it. I mean, honestly, there's times where I think, wow, I feel like I should be paying for this experience. Just between like the networking side of meeting all these new people, and then on top of that, the resources. Like when you fully tap into the ARA and what it has to provide, it's like the resource amount is just wow. There's so many resources from the state side to the national side. Getting to know other rental operators, it's a wonderful experience. I think if someone has the opportunity and the bandwidth to do it, I think they should do it. And yeah.
Well, I would say, again, we really appreciate having you guys in our network, and I'm sure the ARA with, the many trips to caucus and dealing with legislative issues in the state and, staying on top of things and keeping an external look beyond just your company. It's been really appreciated by both peer executive groups as well as with the different associations. But we really appreciate you joining us today, Alberto, and definitely give our best to Rob and Jessica. And
absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on Peer Talk.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan.
You've been listening to Peer Talk from Peer Executive Groups, produced and directed by Noah Crowley and hosted by Dan Crowley. Subscribe to this podcast for notifications of future episodes of Peer Talk.